What's up, YouTube? Cody Bidlow with SprintingWorkouts.com and ATHLETE.X. I've been asked a few times to review the Feed the Cats program by Tony Holler, so that's what we're going to do today. This is a program by Tony Holler. Like I said, he's the coach at Plainfield North High School in Illinois. He's probably best known for coaching Marcellus Moore, who ran 10:36 in high school. Now he runs for Purdue, and he was recently in the U.S. Olympic trials. His program is called Feed the Cats because in his mind, sprinters are like cats and should be trained in a manner that fits their inherent qualities, their proclivities. Cats tend to be lazy, as evidenced by the cats in my house, and then occasionally they get up, sprint across the room all crazy. In the wild, they might sprint to go attack something and get some food, and then they go back and lay down and sleep for another 20 hours. So that's that's why it's called Feed the Cats, because he's trying to give sprinters training that they will enjoy, training that is relevant to them and who they are as a person and as an athlete. And it also fits into sort of a team management, recruiting, coaching philosophy type of thing, where if your training is going to discourage good athletes from joining your program, you're shooting yourself in the foot. If all you do are long runs and everyone hates the training, it's hard and arduous, well, what are the chances that you're going to recruit a football player who could otherwise just be lifting and doing agility drills with the football team in his off season? If you want them to come to your track team, you need to be attracting them to it with training that they're going to want to do and that they're going to be excited about. So not only is this a training program, but it's also sort of a team management philosophy. And even though that's not really what we're talking about today, we're talking more about just the training itself. It's relevant, and it's something that, if you are a coach, you can take this into consideration with how you set up your program, so you can maybe attract athletes by having training that they're going to want to do. If athletes show up and they want to do the training's probably going to be more effective than if they don't want to do it. So there's some psychology mixed into this that I think is interesting and important. As a whole, the Feed the Cats program really prioritizes and emphasizes maximal velocity above all else, but it does place some emphasis on special endurance, plyometrics, core, and those other basic, types of training. Now, as far as the basics of the program, you can look through this document. I'll have it linked below. This is from a program or a seminar that he did. But if you look at his sprint philosophy for cats, don't apply distance training principles to sprinters. Forget about volume, mileage, blah, blah, blah. LSD, I like that. LSD might not make you run faster. Valery Borzov, he smoked cigarettes and was the fastest man in the world at that time. So he's saying that, your aerobic system is only so important. Looks like he really doesn't think it's very important at all. I might take a little issue with that, but overall, I would tend to agree with these general points. If you're training for sprints, you need to be training the alactic phosphate system, which is basically training that is 5 seconds or shorter, give or take, where you're just able to go as fast as you can, as hard as you can, and you're not accumulating a whole lot of lactate. Let's see. Sprinting is all electrical, not chemical, not cardio. Train fast twitch fibers to create bounce and stretch reflex. Jumping improves sprinting. Sprinting improves jumping. So, these are all claims that we could, I think, pretty much agree with. Focus on quality. You can use 40s and 10-meter flies to get faster. Speed is a slow-growing quality, so you have to train it a lot, train it often, and just slowly build those qualities. All this stuff is true. Some more interesting stuff you can look at here. But let's get to what the basics of the program are. So, essentially, the sprint days and the rest days take up about 40% of the program each, with longer sprints, which he labels as lactate days, taking up around 20% of the program. He does sprint drills every day that they're doing something else, so about 4 times a week they'll be doing sprint drills. Speed is trained Monday and Wednesday during the off-season with 40-yard dashes, 10-meter flies, and I think they do some block starts as well occasionally. 1 to 2 times per week during indoor they're training speed, and then 1 time per week during outdoor pretty much. These workouts are like 20 minutes of drills followed by about a half hour to 40 minutes of sprint work. Special endurance is trained every week in February and March using the 23-second drill, where athletes sprint as far as they can in 23 seconds. So you can see that, like in February and March over here, we got the 23-second drill right there. X Factor workouts, which are basically like I'll just show you right here if you give me a second. Squat bounces, bouncy lunges, depth drops, leg swings, hurdle mobility, core, stuff like that. Those are done in between sprint days. So if you're sprinting Monday and Wednesday, they'll do X Factor Tuesday and Thursday. Later in the year, like in May, they'll do broken 300s. So that would be like 150 plus 150, where you're taking 40 seconds rest in between the 150s, and then 8 minutes after you've done that set. You could do 200, 100. You could do 100, 200, but that would probably be not as good as 200 plus 100. Anyways, these are performed in May, like I said. And then other workouts might include 3x30 block starts, 5x100 flying sprints, and then 20x100 if they have really bad weather, done at like a cruising tempo type of pace. Strength is trained every day according to their schedule here, but I don't know exactly what he does, because it seems to me that he leaves it up to the football coach to handle that, and he doesn't have a lot of great things to say about strength training, so I don't think Tony handles the strength workouts or the weights that you see here. I think he handles mostly the X Factor and then the sprint days. As far as the results of the program, you can look at practice times. They're on pntrack.com, and they've got some spreadsheets where you can look and see, like, for example, in 2020, 2021, the top guy ran 4:25 for a 40 meter. You'll see on here, I'll put it up on the screen, but there's some notes as how they time it. But anyways, you can look and see, did they improve over time? Did their practice times improve? All that. And then I went and looked at ATHLETE.net, where you could see their performances in competition. So in 2021, boys took 6th and 8th place in the 100 meter at their sectional championships, 7th and 12th in the 200. Girls took 8th and 10th in the 100 and 15th in the 200. 2020 was obviously kind of a bunk year where nothing happened, so we'll move on to that, or we'll move on from that to 2019. This is where, in 2018 and 2019, Tony really had a lot of success, because he had Marcellus Moore, who recently he ran in the Olympic trials, as I stated earlier. I think he ran 10:36 at their state championships, and he won state. He also won the 200. Other than that, they had some guys place 16th and 18th at conference. Not a whole lot else as far as the sectional championships. The girls in the 100 meter, they took 19th at conference, as well as 30th and 31st in sectionals. In the 200, it looks like the girls got 5th and 8th place at sectionals. Then in 2018, Marcellus once again won the 100 and 200. At sectionals, the boys took 1st and 23rd place in the 100, and then 1st and 7th in the 200. Girls took 6th place in the 100 and the 200 at sectionals. Overall, if you look at progress over time, like if you look at an individual athlete, how they ran, 2018, 2019, or whatever, it does look like a lot of his athletes are improving. So if we want to judge a coach the way we should, which is how are their athletes improving, more so than how fast is their fastest athlete, I would say Tony passes the test, where most of his athletes seem to improve based on what I could see, and so that's a measure of a pretty good program and a pretty good coach. I would be hesitant to look at something like Marcellus Moore, where he had, astronomically amazing performances, but he recently just ran 10:1. Clearly he's just, an amazing athlete and would run fast probably regardless of the program that he was in, but I would venture to guess that because of the emphasis on max velocity, the emphasis on high quality sprinting, that not only did he improve while he was with Tony, but he, had a good base to then build upon once he got to college. Maybe they would increase the volume, maybe do some more longer sprints, maybe more lifting. I don't know how they're training at Purdue, but it does seem like he was set up well for success, not only to improve during the season and during the time where he was with Tony, but also afterwards. And that's another thing that, if an athlete does well, but then they fall on their face when they leave, sometimes that means they're overtrained, or they got beat up, or maybe they maxed out their potential a little too quickly. In the case of Marcellus Moore, he continues to improve, and so not only did he do well while working with Tony, but he also did well afterwards. So I would say that's a good sign for the program. Now, as far as my thoughts overall on the program, overall it seems like a reasonable program to run with high school athletes. This program allows for teaching athletes the fundamentals of fast sprinting. It gives them significant exposure to fast sprinting and does not leave them at risk to the detriments of doing too much over distance running. So if you have athletes who all they do is over distance running, typically their form starts to deteriorate. You get kind of weird injuries that pop up because they're just taking so many steps throughout the course of the program. The amount of rest in the program ensures that most athletes will be able to handle the workload, and it seems like it provides a good work-life balance between the demands of sport, school, and the social lives of the athletes, because in the off-season they get, I think, Friday through Sunday off. Like I said earlier, they're as many times as they sprint, they also have that many off days, so there's a pretty good work-life balance there, and with, athletes who have friends and social lives and school and other responsibilities, I think it's nice to see that a coach is caring about what their athletes do outside of practice and giving them an opportunity to have a life outside of practice, so that way when they do come to practice, they have balance and they're ready to go and they're motivated. They're not just bored and tired of doing the same thing over and over again because they do it 6 days a week or something like that. Now, some of what is said in this presentation that's on the screen I would consider to be kind of dogmatic. The word never is used 29 times. The word always is used 11 times. Some of the absolutist statements that are made may be true, but in general, I try to look at things in less of a black and white manner and try to find kind of the middle ground, because I think when it comes to reality, most of reality exists in the middle and not on the extremes. So some of the statements like, the worst concept is submaximal speed, which we see right here. Or we never do sled pulls, or my sprinters never run tempo, or nothing in the weight room translates to speed. Some of these statements I think are just a little bit over the top with how, hard line they are, how absolutist they are. I'm pretty sure that running submaximal at submaximal speeds can be useful for some athletes, and there's many great athletes who were in programs that used a lot of submaximal running and sprinting. Research shows us that sleds can be useful for improving early acceleration, and I would think high school athletes would be a great target population to use sleds in their training. I think work can be done in the weight room to support you and support what you do on the track, whether that be strengthening an area that's prone to injury, it could be improving mobility by using load, it could be improving force output capabilities. So to say that nothing in the weight room translates to sprinting, I think is a little bit questionable to say. Obviously, on the other side of the extreme would be saying that, get stronger, run faster. That's also not objectively true. But somewhere in the middle is where the truth can be found. Tony says in this document that Cal Dietz's triphasic training helps sprinters and jumpers get better. So that sort of contradicts the statement that nothing in the weight room translates to sprinting. I think it's more that, and he says this in this document, that he's a little unsure about strength training, so that might be a better way to encapsulate his view on it. I don't know that he necessarily, despises strength training, but he clearly isn't comfortable with doing a lot of it, so, that's something just to take into consideration with this program. Another kind of contradiction within this presentation is he says that he never uses tempo, but then he also says that he uses 20 by 100 at a cruising pace on days where there's bad weather. And in my mind, that's a tempo workout. If you're at a cruising pace and you're doing a high volume of runs, that's tempo. So I take a little bit of issue with him saying he never does tempo when he says he does tempo, he just doesn't call it that, So that's another thing to consider. I do think we should exercise some caution when absolutist statements make it seem as if training is completely black and white, because in reality the needs of different athletes will vary, and this means we should be open to different methods of training if a certain use case arises. So maybe Marcellus Moore didn't need to do any lifting. He was running fast, he was healthy, all that. But if you had an athlete who maybe they had constant hamstring issues, or they were just really underdeveloped in their glutes and hamstrings, or really underdeveloped in their core, well then strength training would work for that athlete. Or if someone, just can't handle sprinting fast twice a week and they're always getting injured because of it or something like that, then maybe they would benefit from some tempo endurance training. There's room to venture outside of the confines of our primary methods of training, and I think it's important for us to be open-minded, so that way if there is an opportunity to use something that's slightly different than what we typically focus on with our training, we can do that, and we're not limited by our own dogmatic thinking or limitations we place on ourselves because of our philosophy. I think one reason why Tony's program became so popular is because of the success of Marcellus Moore. I don't know if he would be as popular as he is now if he didn't have Marcellus in his program, but maybe he would. can't be the judge of that. Now, if we are analyzing a program, we want to see whether the program has a high probability of improving our abilities and whether it can do a better job than the alternatives. So the alternatives might be a Charlie Francis style of training, or Clyde Hart, or Tony Wells, or Dan Paff style. There's no doubt in my mind that Tony has had success as a coach and with his Feed the Cats program. Looking at the previous few years of individual results, I don't see a team that is objectively dominant to the degree that I would take what he says as being, Holy Scripture. But like I said earlier, his athletes do seem to improve over time while under his tutelage, so that tells me that the program is pretty effective and it's well fitting to the athletes that are coming through his program. Not every day are you going to get an athlete who can run 10.3 as a high schooler. So we can't just look at, did he win state every year? Because if he doesn't have the pool of athletes in his area that would lead to him winning state every year, then we need to look more at, did the athletes improve over time? And that's a better judgment of whether the program is good or not. And in that regard, I think he does pass the test, to where most of his athletes do seem to improve, and that's a good thing. That's what we want. So then it comes to the question of, should you use the Feed the Cats program? And I think we can take some things from the program and use them to our advantage. So there's definitely value in sprinting fast year round, as long as you're not injured and you do take a little bit of time off just to give yourself a break and allow your brain to kind of refresh itself before you get back into another season of training. It is good to sprint fast year round as much as you can. Most of a sprinter's efforts should be dedicated toward developing specific qualities that are needed to run fast, such as acceleration, maximal velocity, speed endurance. And this program definitely has a big focus on acceleration and speed, and then gets into speed endurance later in the year. Tracking performances and using a timing system or competition in practice is a great way to motivate athletes to run as fast as they can in practice. And exposure to fast speeds in practice will likely help them run fast in competition. So this combination of using timing as a way to kind of create some competition within the athlete themselves, having athletes chase each other or run against each other in practice, these are great ways to work on, being competitive, running as fast as you can. And so those are good things in this program. Avoiding, quote, lactate training until closer to competition also seems reasonable. I think Lauren Segrave said something about this a while back, about using special endurance for only a certain number of weeks. And I think Tony definitely, follows that and agrees with that. I thought I saw it somewhere over here, but here you can see some examples of kind of microcycles themselves during preseason, competitive season, championship season, and all that. Fast sprints, bouncy exercises, plyometric, sprint drills, they all make a great foundation for a short sprints training program, so I think those are things that we can definitely take away from this and use in our own training, and I think it can benefit us for sure. There's also some things I would question before implementing the Feed the Cats program into your own training, if you were to just copy it and use it exactly as it's shown in this document. For one, I think tempo endurance does have its place for sprint athletes. Like I said in one of my previous videos, the ground contact times I was recording in a 6x150 tempo workout, they were pretty close to what I see when I'm sprinting fast. But the risk for injury is lower as long as your volumes aren't crazy. The nervous system fatigue feels like it's less to me than max velocity sprinting. So whether a full rest day versus doing tempo endurance on that same day is better or worse for an athlete, that could be debated. But I do think there is room for tempo training in your sprint program, and you don't have to use it all the time. You don't have to, do crazy volumes, but I would stay open to the idea of using it, especially on days where maybe you don't feel like sprinting, but you also feel like you have room to do a little bit of running. Don't be afraid to use strength training. That's another thing. They do strength training pretty much every day. So if they're training 4 days a week, they'll do strength training after that, each one of those days. But I don't know exactly what he's doing, because it seems like he has the football coach do that. But like I said, don't be afraid of using strength training. As long as your workloads are reasonable and the types of work you're performing are done for a purpose that is relevant to sprinting and your needs for sprinting, that the strength training you're doing is relevant to what you need in order to run faster, then I think that's good. If you were just strength training just to do it, and there was, no theoretical backing to why you were doing it or what you were trying to improve with it, then yeah, it might be a little questionable. But as long as you have some reason you're doing it and what you're doing fits into a logical framework to work on those things you're targeting, then I would definitely, use strength training. I would exercise caution if your program is only filled with fast work, mainly due to concerns for tissue health. So personally, when I've focused solely on sprinting, plyometrics, and faster forms of lifting, I tended to have issues with tendon health. So I think that there's some amount of slow strength training that has a protective effect on your tendons, your muscles, and if implemented properly, this can be really helpful for you, and it's going to be more relevant as you age. So Tony's working with high school athletes, a population that has the ability to adapt and benefit from training without getting injured probably more than any other age group because of their hormonal status. Their body's just, really developing and ready to take on whatever training is thrown at it. So if you consider that this program is used mainly in high school athletes, but you're not a high school athlete, say you're like me, you're 29 years old, well, you have to consider what are the effects of always sprinting fast, always lifting fast, doing plyometrics and not doing any slow strength training, not doing anything that is sort of prehab or tissue health related. You would probably have to add some things into this program for it to work for you if you're an older athlete or if you're someone who's dealt with a lot of injuries. So this program would be a little bit questionable for an older athlete, especially if they have a significant injury history. It doesn't mean that you can't use these fundamental concepts in your program, but you might have to add some things in, spread out the work a little bit, replace some of the fast days with a tempo day, or maybe do some slow strength training instead of just plyometrics or something like that. These are things that I would consider if you were thinking about implementing this program. So all in all, I think this is definitely a good program. I think Tony has really, shown himself to be a good coach and all that, but just be a little bit hesitant when you see things like my sprinters never do this. Worst thing is this. Strength, nothing in the weight room translates to speed. The strongest athletes are not the fastest athletes. But it's possible that the strongest sprinter on the line is the fastest sprinter in that race. Yes, the strongest athlete out there as a whole, Thor and Eddie Hall, they're not going to run very fast. But within the context of sprinters who are focusing mainly on sprinting, it's probably helpful to be stronger than it is to be weaker. He also says that, getting fit does not make you fast. Sure. But being fit probably supports your ability to recover between sprints, allows you to run more sprints at a higher intensity because you're physically in good shape, So these are those things that I would be just keeping in the back of your mind when you're reading something like this. I would suggest you read this. I'd suggest you check it out. It's got great information in it. But just keep those things in mind so that way you can stay open to, what will help you overall and not miss out on certain things that might benefit you in your training. Here on the screen you can see how the program is sort of set up. So earlier in the year they got sprint, X Factor sprint. Then after tryouts and during indoor they go sprint, X Factor, then 3 days off. They start bringing in these lactate days with those 23-second runs here in February. Then as they get into late February and March, you got a lactate day, X Factor, sprint, X Factor, and then a meet. And then you have two speed days, one lactate day, So you can see how this progresses over time. As you get into outdoor, the meets are taking over the lactate days. On weeks where there's 2 meets, they're not doing any speed training. They're just letting the meets take care of that. So, that's something to learn from this, how you can use meets to your advantage as a training tool, and then just center the rest of your work week around making sure you're healthy enough to get to those meets and compete well. Here's where it shows that about 40% are sprint and X Factor, 40% are off days, and around 20% are lactate days. There's also some things about queuing in here that's interesting and useful, but here's another sample workout program here. Speed drills, 40s, flies, weights. Next day is X Factor. Next day is kind of like Monday. Next day is like Tuesday. Then they take the weekend off, including Friday. But yeah, all in all, this is a pretty good program. I would suggest you, learn from it what you can. consider the things that I said about, the absolutist statements that are in here. Maybe reconsider how those things might benefit you. They might not, depending on who you are. So it's not like you have to do strength training or have to do tempo runs, but don't discount them either. They have a role depending on what your needs are. So if you are considering using this program, just keep in mind that, you can modify it to fit what works for you and what your needs are. And overall, it seems like a pretty good program that's helping people improve. And if people are improving and they're having fun, then I would say that a coach is doing a good service for the community. That word is so overused these days; it's ridiculous. But it's there's clearly some benefits to the program, and Tony is clearly helping his athletes improve, and it seems like they're having fun with their program. So ultimately, in high school, if you improve a little bit, you have fun, and you can move on to either compete in college, or if you don't do that, you can at least walk away and not be all injured and broken and can have a pain-free life after that. I would say that's a success as a high school coach. So props to Tony on having a good program. My critiques are my critiques, as you saw, but overall it seems like a good program. So that's it for now, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Love to hear what you think about this, if you've tried it, what your results are. But other than that, that's all for today. So this is Cody Bidlow with SprintingWorkouts.com and ATHLETE.X, signing off.